Automatically being recorded.
Great feature.
Yeah, welcome everyone who may be watching this back on the recording as we're letting people in for the webinar today. We will be talking about the 3 critical factors to overpower the resistance to change, brought to you by Team Stetzel. I'm very excited about the presentation that we're going to have today. And by the way, be on the lookout. We're going to be doing these webinars for you guys quarterly by popular demand.
Speaking of change, as we wait for everybody to join, what about the crazy weather? We went from flip-flops and shorts to sweatshirts and now back to flip-flops and shorts. You gotta love Texas weather.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and for those of you who are watching this back on a recording, what you may or may not know is it is the middle of October, and we're down on the coast, so I think the weather will still be a little shifty. Welcome, CJ and Mark, Russell, Jennifer, Shannon. As everybody starts to gather, just know we're going to wait just a few minutes to get everybody in. I didn't open the line until just half past the hour, so people are joining. It's so great to see all of you coming on today. All right, so Dennis, where in the world are you?
I am in sunny Sargent, Texas, in the dedicated remote virtual studio called my Airstream. This is I leveraged the pandemic to completely change the way we did business, and my dedicated office is now a really, really cool looking Airstream. It is absolutely amazing. I think everyone should have one of these.
I think everyone should have one of those too, so that I can kick you out of the house to go work in the Airstream. Awesome. Welcome, Patty, Jonathan, Jason, Richard. All right, so starting to slow down a little bit, Dennis. Let's give them a couple more minutes to get situated, and then we can get started. For those of you who are on with us already, I will be watching the chat window. The chat window comes directly to Dennis and myself, or you can use the Q&A window as well on this webinar. So it's a little bit different than just a regular Zoom meeting. So either place, I will be monitoring those as we move along. All right. Just a couple more minutes. Dennis, it looks like we've got just about 15 people joined us.
Excellent. And for those of you joining from colder climates, I apologize for rubbing it in about it being warm here in Texas. I don't apologize for living here, but I apologize sort of for rubbing it in. All right.
The weather is very nice.
Weather is
Are you
amazing.
ready? Do you want to get started? All right, so we've topped out. We've got 17 on the line right now.
Awesome.
So if you want to go ahead and get started, I think we can do that. Just for purposes of, what's happening today, Dennis is going to be doing the main presentation. I'll insert my 2 cents as we go along, as he loves. But I will also, as I said before, be monitoring the chat window as well as the Q&A window. You can use either one of those to ask questions as we go along. And Dennis, if it's okay with you to answer questions as we move through the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are great because technology connects us in ways that we have not been able to connect in the past. The hard part is that we've got people who are remote, and not every platform facilitates it as well as others. I think this is a great platform, but I want it to be interactive. So if you do have a question, just jump in, type it in the chat. Trisha will pause me and we'll cover the question. If not, I'll just continue to go. But please, if you do have questions or you want to interject, do so in the chat. So once again, welcome. We are Team RXC, Trisha Stetzel, Dennis Stetzel. Results Extreme, we're in the business of business solutions in partnership with Focal Point Coaching and Training Excellence. And this is the 3 critical factors to overcome or overpower the resistance to change. And so to help demonstrate that, there is a formula. And this formula, credit Richard Beckard and David Glacier. David took the namesake. It's Glaciers Formula, fondly called Glaciers Formula. And it really calls out the 3 critical factors to overcoming resistance to change, whether that's in yourself, within your organization, within your team, within your extended partners. It's kind of a universal formula. Now, this is what it looks like. Now, keep in mind, this is not an actual mathematical formula, but it's written this way to help demonstrate the point. So D times V times F is greater than R. So let's unpack that a little bit more. The D represents dissatisfaction, and that dissatisfaction is how things are today. If you're dissatisfied with a particular condition, truly dissatisfied, not complacent with what's going on, but truly dissatisfied, then this number, whatever that factor is greater than 0. So you have to be, in order to overcome resistance to change, there has to be a dissatisfaction level that is greater than 0. And that's different than just simply giving yourself permission to move things along. If you're not unhappy with making payroll to payroll and you're just okay with it, well, then you're not really dissatisfied. If your team is okay with meeting a quota or just coming under the quota, but it's not necessarily dissatisfaction, then that particular number or that factor, however you want to call it out, can equal 0. And if that equals 0, if that dissatisfaction level registers as 0 with you or anyone in your organization or anyone in your extended team, your suppliers, your partners, your colleagues, your referrals, you're going to have a really, really tough time, according to this formula, overcoming the resistance to change.
So, Dennis, there's a question, and I'm assuming it's because you mentioned complacency, a question in the Q&A section. So what is the difference between dissatisfaction and complacency?
So complacency is just, I'm okay with it. We may say the words that we're dissatisfied, but we're really not. Like, are we okay with getting by? Are we okay with having enough money to sustain next month? Are we okay with the performance of a particular supplier? Are we okay with, we may say, gosh, I'm really unhappy with the quality of products that I'm getting in order to manufacture my final product. Like I don't like, I'm dissatisfied or I'm unhappy with the screws that are coming in because I'm getting customer complaints. But if we're okay with it, that complacency is, yeah, but it's good enough is good enough. Well, that's complacency. And a lot of times our business owners and our business leaders, they're dissatisfied. They're unhappy with the complaints and they are truly, they've reached that level of dissatisfaction. The complacency exists within the organization. And so, or the complacency exists within the supplier. And so if the employees or the partner base haven't reached that level of dissatisfaction, you can call that out as an owner, as a leader, as many times as you want, as loudly as you want, from the hilltops, the highest hilltop in the valley. It's not going to matter. That dissatisfaction level needs to resonate and break through that complacency that exists within that extended team, with that extended ecosystem. And so that complacency is really, well, good enough is good enough. I delivered the order, or good enough is good enough. I met the quota, or came just under. Does that make sense?
Yeah, from my own perspective, really understanding the dissatisfaction versus the complacency, I'll just add my 2 cents. You're welcome, Dennis. It really is about the frustration, right? The frustration behind something not being the way that it should be. And if you're okay with it, if you're complacent with it, then you're contributing to the issue, right? So when you reach that level of dissatisfaction is when you're really ready to move to the next step. And I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Now, the V in this formula is vision, right? It's vision of what's possible. So it's that vision of how are we going to stretch ourselves to meet the needs of our client base? How are we going to stretch ourselves to meet the needs of our particular cause, right? It's that overall vision of what's possible, not what exists today. It's not how do I make it through the day? And again, back to complacency, it's not, well, good enough is good enough. And the vision is we turn the sign from closed to open every day, and then we turn the sign from open to closed every day, and we go home. And as long as there's money in the till and it pays the bills, that's not a vision. That's not a vision of what's possible. That's getting by. That vision of what's possible is what you need to paint within yourself. It's what you need to project as an owner, as a leader. It's what you need to instill in everyone around you, everyone from your spouse, your partner, your friends, your family, your coworkers, your employees, your suppliers. Everyone in that ecosystem should understand and know your vision of what's possible. If they're not on board, or if that vision of what's possible, if it resonates at a level of 0, then again, this mathematical equation, it doesn't work. Because if the dissatisfaction can be at a factor of 10, but you multiply that by 0, and mathematicians out there, 10 times 0 equals 0, right? So the lack of a vision for what's possible for the future just drags this formula down back to 0, and that resistance to change, don't overcome it. Don't overcome it.
So Dennis, there's a question here and in the chat window about vision. Does vision equal goals, long-term goals?
It's a good question. So the vision is a combination of all of the goals. So your goal could be, increase revenue by 28% by the end of the year. The vision speaks to why. What are we going to do with that 28%? What is it? Why is 28% important? If it's just a number, you'll meet the number. If the goal is to expand your client base to an underserved community, well, why are you doing that? I mean, it sounds noble. We're going to go serve the underserved, but the vision is why. So the vision would be a combination of, I want to increase my revenue, my true revenue, or my profit by 28%. And another goal is to serve the underserved community, because my vision is like, I'm going to take that 28% increase in profit and I'm going to improve the community at large. The community is going to be a better place. I'm going to change the lives of the underserved community by taking that 28% profit and applying it directly back into the community and making this a better place to live. People can rally around that. But we're going to achieve 28% greater revenue. Okay, that's a number. Good enough is good enough. But that vision, there are goals associated with it, but it's a combination of goals that create a picture for the future that's better than what you have today. It's what's possible, not how we exist in the present. Fair? That answer?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I just want to comment in the vision space, as a small business owner, and even folks that we work with on a regular basis, talking about vision, many small business owners don't have that written down, right? Vision is something for what I hear a lot of. That's reserved for corporate, that's reserved for bigger teams, that's reserved for bigger businesses. It's not. That vision, although you may be sole owner of your business, that vision is still very important, right? The things we think about and practice the most become our reality. And that vision can become your reality if you have it written down. So a vision is important in all businesses.
Absolutely. And think about Trisha and everyone else. Think about how powerful that is when you speak to other people that might consume, the widgets or the services or the products that you have. And you say, I'm Dennis Stetzel and I sell tires. That's great. There's a whole lot of other people that sell tires. What makes you different? Well, it's what am I doing with my business? What am I doing as a result of selling those tires? Am I making the road safer for everyone on the planet? Right? Am I delivering families to and from their vacation safely in bad weather? Right? Those are the types of things that people can rally around. And that vision of what's possible, it becomes more than just manufacturing tires with high quality rubber. It goes into that vision would feed every single part of that assembly line that puts that tire together, because the vision of delivering a family safely from their vacation spot back to their home, that's powerful, right? That's much more than just making sure that you get 250 tires across the assembly line. And that's what turns good companies to great companies, is that vision. All right, next, the F is first steps. Those first steps, you don't climb the Himalayas in one giant leap, right? You have to take one step at a time. And the first steps, those are the steps toward the vision, right? So you have to have that vision. You have to define that vision. But what are those first steps? What are the things that you're going to do? What's that tangible action, the thing that you're going to do as a first step toward that vision? You know, a lot of times you can easily determine that you're unhappy and dissatisfied. And if you spend enough time thinking about your why, the vision becomes relatively clear. Then what do you do with that? What are those first steps? How do you make progress toward that vision? And that's kind of elusive, because in all of the priorities and all the things that we have to do every day as business owners, you know, that if you've been with us for a while, you understand the 3 I's of the business owner. Are you the technician? Are you the manager? Or are you the entrepreneur? And so what is that first step in order to achieve that vision? Do you have to go achieve something tactically at the technician level? Do you need to go make some adjustments and create a report as the manager? Or do you need to go create strategic partnerships as the entrepreneur and really sell that vision or promote that vision externally in order to establish a solid foundation for growth in the future? It's those first steps. And if you haven't identified those first steps, you linger in the I'm unhappy and I'm not taking steps toward my goal. You live in that negative cycle endlessly, right? Those first steps, again, mathematically, if that F is equal to 0, the equation never overcomes the resistance to change.
Yeah, so Patty and Russell, I hope it's okay. You guys have asked kind of a similar question, so I'll ask it in my own way. So, Dennis, do these first steps, does it need to be complicated? Does it have to be like this 6-month plan towards your vision?
No, actually, it can be something as simple as making a list of priorities and taking what's the number one priority? Maybe something as simple as that, right? Because that represents a change, and you've overcome that resistance to change. You've written down the priorities. You've sorted through what those things are that are keeping you from taking that first step. And it may be 1% change. It may mean 1% change in your business, or just even 1% change in your daily routine that frees up 5 minutes, right? But you've taken that first step to overcoming the resistance to the larger change. So it doesn't have to be big. In fact, I would say start with those things that are simple. Start with a prioritization list, right? If you're at that point. It could be something as large as we need to hire a whole new department with a different skill set, or it could be as simple as I just need to sort through my thoughts and put them on paper. So no, it does not have to be large, complex, a multi-day workshop planning session. It can be as simple as just doing some introspection and looking at what your priorities are for the day, for the week, for the month, or even just what's next and writing it down. So keep it simple.
Okay.
And then ultimately on the right side of this formula, it's the resistance to change, right? That resistance to change. This plays itself out in real life, right? The dissatisfaction multiplied by the vision, multiplied by first steps, that must be greater than the resistance to change. And again, that the most challenging part in getting through that change, if anything on the left-hand side is 0, you just continue to spin and you never break through that magical rubber band that keeps snapping you back to the same place that you were. And I mentioned complacency, right? Complacency is not dissatisfaction, just simply saying that you're unhappy with the situation, or saying that, I have a vision, but not really, really believing in it, or being unwilling or unable to take that first step. You just keep snapping back. And what we find over and over and over again, probably the most challenging, are those first steps. identifying those first steps, taking those first steps, committing to those first steps, and moving forward. There's a, Amazon is great. They have a great saying, fail fast, and move on. You take that first step, you may trip, you may fall, you may scrape your knee, but get right back up and take another first step, because what you've done by taking that first step is you've learned that you needed to course correct. But ultimately, the three critical factors outlined here, dissatisfaction, vision, and first step, they must be greater than 0 in you, in your organization, in your employees, in your suppliers. That has to be greater than 0. Otherwise, you're going to meet that resistance on a daily basis. So I know we've had some questions. Trisha, any additional questions? We're coming toward the end here to round it out.
No, just some, insights from Shannon. Wow, I never thought about it this way. Mark, loving that it's not overcomplicated to really come by, right? Being able to move forward with change, and that first steps is really important. If you guys would like to weigh in on, was this helpful? Was this helpful to get started? And, I think, Dennis, when we talk about change, again, it's not just meant for our friends in corporate America. It's not just meant for our larger businesses. It's meant for our small business owners, people who are in the profit. I see some of our nonprofit folks that we work with are on with us today. And, even in that nonprofit space, we need to take all of this into consideration. So here's a question, Dennis, that just rolled up since I mentioned nonprofits, I'm betting. How does this play out when you have volunteers?
Really critical for volunteers, right? Volunteers are there, out of the kindness of their heart. Typically, they're giving back, but they're also not paid employees, and so those volunteers, it works the same way, right? If they're not dissatisfied with a condition, or you haven't shared the vision, right, or they don't know what steps to take, they're gonna spin, and they're gonna continue to operate the way that they've always operated. Right? They're going to continue to do things the way they've always been done. And if your vision is much larger than where you are today, but you haven't shared that vision, or they don't share that vision, or they don't even understand what's possible, right? Their focus is to turn out the next widget, or serve that next customer, or that next needy person in the way that they've always been served, but not necessarily change the way that they do it to expand and grow and serve the community better. Then we'll stay where we are. One of our bigger clients that comes to mind, Innovative Alternatives, and I know Sharon won't mind us talking about it. We had to pivot from being everything in person, and we're talking about counseling service. You're talking about very, very personalized interactions with human beings, with some of their deepest problems. We had to pivot and go to virtual as a result of the pandemic. That vision of what was possible, Sharon's COO said, we want to be the Amazon of mental health. That's a vision, right? And you can't do that by being a small little organization sitting inside of a building. You've got to expand and grow and test new things and take first steps and experiment with technologies, experiment with, how do we isolate a room? How do we ensure that the person being counseled isn't in the room with someone else and being impacted negatively by someone else that's standing in the room? And we ultimately have to be, dissatisfied with the situation that we're in. We're dissatisfied that we can't serve as many people as we possibly could. We're not making that greater impact on the community. And it was really, really easy for people to kind of clam up and say, well, we're in a tough situation, and let's just get through this as best we can. That organization extended beyond that minimalist approach, and leverage their counselors, leverage their volunteers, leverage their networks in that shared vision. We're not happy with the number of people that we serve. We can't reach them. More people need our help than we can possibly reach. That's not a good thing. We're unhappy with that. We're truly dissatisfied. And so the first steps that we're going to take, and we're going to need help. We need volunteers. We need the board to get involved. Sharing that vision, sharing that level of dissatisfaction really is tremendously helpful in those nonprofits, because the volunteers, they can walk away. And if they don't see that compelling vision and you haven't outlined those first steps, that resistance to change isn't going to be overcome. I think you may be on mute, Tricia. Maybe.
Oh, I am. Thank you. Eli brought up a good point here. He's a solopreneur. He doesn't have a team of people to work with. So what is that resistance to change like for people who are on their own?
So Eli, you do have a team though, right? You may, on paper, you may be the solopreneur that has, you are the owner, operator, practitioner, LLC, signator, the only one that's authorized for the checkbook. You got your name on the credit card, but your team is your entire network of suppliers, clients, partners, referrals. They share your vision. You should express the dissatisfaction and make sure that they understand what you're trying to do. And they share in your first steps. You may be a solopreneur on paper. You may be a solopreneur from a documentation standpoint or from an employee-based standpoint. But trust me when I say you absolutely, if you have a business, you have a team. Whether you only pay yourself or sometimes we don't pay ourselves, if you're the only person on the payroll, that does not mean that you are a company of one. All of these principles, you need other people to help you change. And so these are still very, very important. And it's very important that you communicate those to your extended team, whether they're on the payroll or not.
Yeah, so the nonprofit and volunteer was a very popular topic, Dennis. So I think we've got time. We'll take this last one and then come to the close so that we don't keep folks too long. But here's the last question. How do I identify the volunteers that will stay the course towards accomplishing the vision to avoid having to find new volunteers?
That is a tough one. I think it does start, you mentioned in here, accomplishing the vision. And so, anyone with hands and a heartbeat, sometimes we want to take on as a volunteer because we always need help in our nonprofits. But do they share the vision? Are they in it for the right reasons? The board that I chair and one of the other boards that I'm a member of, we don't just take anybody. We have a vetting process and we interview people and we talk about the vision. If you're here to build your resume, if you're here to serve community, to serve hours and you have community service obligations, or it just looks good, when you're posting for your next job, that's not why you want. You want someone here, but it starts with articulating that vision and being very, very clear. We are here to change the world through mediation and counseling. We help the community grow and we help the community thrive one person at a time by making them healthier, improving their mental health. Like, that's a vision. And if you're not on board with that, and if you're here, if you're part of the board or you're part of the volunteer organization, if you have any other motive, I got to do the best I can to figure that out. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you don't share the values, and they're probably going to leave at some point because they had some other agenda. It doesn't mean that it's negative. It just means it's not shared. And so I would say, in order to find people who are going to help you towards accomplishing that vision, you have to articulate it well, and you have to run through a thoughtful Q&A and just get that gut feel. Are they really in it for the right reasons? And do I want to bring them in as a volunteer? Because if they do share the vision and they do want to make that change that, all of the nonprofits want to make in some way, shape, or form, if they're bought in, they're going to stick around for as long as they can.
Yeah,
start
excellent questions. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It makes having a webinar much more interesting when we have folks participating in the conversation. So, Dennis, you want to wrap us up?
Yep. So let's see. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate it. We're going to take it right to the end. Couple things. So in terms of what's next, the business growth score. If you haven't taken the business growth assessment, hit that QR code. It's going to take you to a little questionnaire. It's 3 to 5 minutes. It covers clarity, effectiveness, growth, sales, and leadership. it gives you a growth score. And subsequent to that, I'll reach out, give you a call, and we can go over it. I can tell you what it means. I see a summary of it. You get a much more detailed report in terms of business growth score, but go and take that. Also, if you log on to Team RXC, if you'd like to spend a little time with either Trisha or I, our calendars are available. We've blocked out time in 30 and 15-minute increments. Go out, teamrxc.com, and click and find us and book on our calendars. And last but not least, thank you for all that joined, and we'll be sending you via email a free ebook entitled The 4 Critical Areas of Business. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Trisha, any parting closing words?
No, just thank you everyone for joining and participating. We appreciate you. For those of you who didn't hear the announcement at the beginning of this webinar, we will be doing these quarterly, so be on the lookout. You'll all get an invitation to the next one. You guys have an amazing day. Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, everyone.